Oh, it worked. It worked. It worked. Okay. All right, everybody, stop talking. Thank you. So the gentleman in the back, I need you to track with me. Sometimes we get sort of excited with each other, so stay with me. Also, you're not going to see me for 2 weeks, and it'll be sad. So, you'll be sorry if you don't listen. You won't be sorry. Because it's Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgiving. So does everybody know that we're not meeting next week? Yes. So out of my the abundant goodness of my heart, am not giving you any writing assignment over Thanksgiving because um, because people travel but I am going to ask you to do some reading for me, but only the amount that I would give you for 1 week. So here's what you do if you're going somewhere for Thanksgiving: get your work done, and then you're done, and you don't have to do it over the second week. Yes, sir. You're sorry for reading all of it? Oh, no. It is never bad to read more than I ask you to read. This is always good. Yeah. That's easy. That's not tough. Okay. So this week, you guys read sort of a hodgepodge. I had 2 chapters in there about travel and about the friars, St. Francis and St. Dominic. So let's talk, first of all, everybody open up your reading questions. Now, I want to just give you guys a little talking to about your reading questions. A little birdie who shall remain nameless told me that this person looked in their student's reading guide and there's just nothing written in it. And this may be true of more than one person. Do the reading guide. Here's why I made the questions. First of all, I'm not a super big fan of workbooks and things like that. I don't think they're very helpful. But I've also learned something over the years that if I don't write it down, okay, let me phrase it this way. If I write something down, I tend to remember it longer than if I just read it. I read a lot. I don't know. It sounds like Jonathan is a big reader because he read all of King Arthur in 1 week. And so I kind of, how some people are gluttons and they eat too much? I'm a reading glutton. I read too much. And and I just grab another one. It's like, oh, another book. And then I look at the pile of books and I think, yeah, I don't really remember that book because I didn't take notes or write anything down. So this is a chance for you to jot down the things that I thought might be important for you to remember. Does that make sense? I chose the questions specifically because I thought this is something I want them to remember out of this chapter. And so it also does another thing. I hate to say it like this, it proves to your mom you actually read it. Sometimes moms would like it proven to them that you actually read it. So please do it. If you don't know the answer to a question, you can't find it, well, we go over all of them. Write it down while we're here together. Jot it down in there. So this is as much as I can encourage you to do that. If you're already doing it, then I'm not talking to you. Then you're doing what I asked you to do. But if you're not, this is for you. I'm not going to collect them and grade them or anything like that. But the best things in life come when we're not being graded, when we just do it for ourselves. So, okay, that's my mom's speech. I'm done. Let's talk about traveling in the Middle Ages. Tell me some difficulties of traveling in the Middle Ages. Zach.
Crossing a river.
What's hard about crossing a river? Okay, first of all, you have to pay a toll. Does everybody understand what we mean by a toll? Have you ever taken the toll road to Chicago? They collect money periodically. You have to throw coins in a little bin or pay for a pass. And what did they do with the toll money? Do you know? They maintain the road, right? They spend the money on the road. So in the Middle Ages, every bridge would have a toll, and they would use it to maintain the bridge. But it kind of stinks for you if you have to go over a lot of bridges. Hans, you're up. Bad roads. You go ahead, Caleb, and give me yours because you've been waiting.
Robbers and outlaws.
Okay. These are three big ones. Yeah, Oren.
I think tolls would be better than like, modern day taxes because if you don't use a road here, you still have to pay for it.
See, this is why people sometimes like tolls. Also, this is not a medieval thing, this is a modern thing. Some people have noticed that when you take toll roads, they seem to be better maintained than the roads that the government collects taxes for and maintains, because the government collects the taxes, but they might not spend it on the road. They might spend it on something else, maybe something I don't want them to spend it on. So it's not a bad system, but Oren, still, if you're the one paying the tolls, it kind of stinks. And Dorothy Mills tells us this: on the river Loire in France, from Orléans to the sea, there were 74 tolls. I mean, even if each of them isn't very much, 74 is a lot. Yes, so tolls on roads, tolls on bridges. Okay, bad roads, Hans said. Bad in what way?
Like maybe they're run down or muddy. Yeah. And you can't really walk on them with your horse.
Have you ever tried to go walk on a trail or a path after it rains? A dirt path. It's not graveled or anything. Or a bike trail, a bike path. My family likes to do off-road bicycling. They go on the trails on Sylvan Island and stuff, and they'll check the internet after it rains because they close them after it rains. You will get stuck in the mud. You can't ride it. Bad roads, muddy roads, it's terrible. So imagine I have a horse pulling a cart, and now my wheels are this deep in mud. Great. Now I'm out, I'm pulling the horse, I'm pushing the cart, I'm all muddy. Roads, I don't remember where I read this years ago. The Romans had great roads. Do we all kind of know about that? That the Romans built really, really superior roads, some of which are still being used. But after the Roman Empire fell and things sort of went into disrepair, they say the roads didn't get as good as Roman roads again until maybe the 1900s, early 1900s, late 1800s. And I remember reading, it was Ben Franklin or John Adams, one of the founding fathers, and they were traveling to one of the constitutional conventions, and it took them, I don't know, almost 2 weeks to get from New York to Philadelphia because the roads were so bad, because they were stuck in the mud half the time. Or after it rains, you just can't travel. You physically can't travel. You're just stuck there until the road dries out. Can you imagine? Yeah, that would be very difficult. And Caleb, remind me what you said.
Robbers and outlaws.
Robbers. Do you get the idea again that some places were a little lawless in the Middle Ages? We had the whole, the gentleman in the back of the room there, and Asher were having a nightly battle and kidnapping each other and burning each other's crops. There's that, but then there's just guys by the side of the road that will jump out and rob you. I guess we'd call it a mugging today. They might hurt you, but they will take your stuff. And if I'm carrying lots of stuff or valuable stuff, this is a problem. So can you see why most people in the Middle Ages never traveled very far from their homes? Many people never went, listen to what I'm about to say and think about it. Many people never went more than 10 miles away from their home, ever in their whole lives.
That's not a lot.
Well, no, moving was not a thing because you had to get a job. You have to be able to support yourself where you're going to. And if I have a blacksmith shop or whatever, well, I can't build a new shop somewhere else just because I want to move. And maybe I'm a peasant and I'm sort of tied to the land. I don't have money to move. If I'm nobility, this is my land. Do you know what I mean? Like the king or my duke, the guy whose vassal I am, has given me this land. He didn't give me other land. I can't say, hey, I'd like to move. Can you give me other land and give this land to someone else? Moving was not a thing. I don't know this, Oren, but I'm wondering how recently people moving around a lot is. My grandma, this would seem very old to you, but obviously it doesn't seem so old to me because she was my grandma. She was born in 1919. All right. And I remember she lived on a farm in southern Illinois, and there was always a greenhouse up the neighboring farm up on a hill. And so I would go there. I love my grandma so much, and I spent time with them. And I was in my 20s. I already was a mother, and I was in her kitchen, and we were looking out the window, and my grandma just stood back to me. She said, "You know, I grew up in that house." What? For 20 years, grandma did not tell me. No, my dad built that house. What? My grandma had lived in that her whole life. That county, that not even just part of a county. And she was 75 years old, and she was looking out the window at the house that she grew up in, that her dad built. It's just, and we don't live that way. I've lived a lot of places. How many of you guys have always lived in the Quad Cities? All right, so a fair number of you, a fair number of you. But how many of you have always lived in the same house? Oh, that's awesome. See, I'm jealous. I think that would be really nice. I have not, but anyway. So Oren, no, I don't think moving. I think moving is sort of a modern thing. I will close this topic with a Roman proverb. There was a Roman philosopher who said, "A person who travels or moves changes his sky, but doesn't change himself." You know, you have different scenery, but you still take the same person with you. Do you know what I mean? If I move, I'm still me. Anyway, I'm sorry. Apparently, we're philosophizing today. All right. If you decide to travel, and in a little while, I'm going to tell you a big reason why we might want to travel, despite what I said about a lot of people never leaving home. If you decide to travel, where are you going to spend the night? You have options. Where might you spend the night? Hans, or no, let Asher do it. Okay, option number 1, in the grass along the side of the road. Can you imagine doing that today? Just pulling your car over by the side of the road and just dumping your sleeping bag on the ground? Would people think that was kind of weird?
I just don't want to sleep in the back of the car.
Bridges and stuff.
That's true. Well, but this is not talking about homeless people. This is just travel. Okay, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. If my husband and I were going on a trip and he suggested we just put our sleeping bags by the side of the road, I would say, no, I think we'll be looking for a hotel. No, I don't like the sound of that. I read a book about a man in he did this in the 1950s. Maybe the 30s. I can't remember. He decided to walk from northern France to Rome. He just decided to walk, do a pilgrimage to Rome on foot. And he said, I'm not going to ride on any wheeled vehicle, and I'm only going to sleep indoors when I have to. And as this was only 90 or 70 years ago, and he just he just went behind the bushes and slept on the ground and kept walking. I was fascinated by this, but that seems so odd. Now, what? Yeah, he had water, and he had some money, and he had it arranged. It wasn't too primitive. He had it arranged that at various towns along the way, his wife would send money so that he could buy food. So he had supplies coming, and he did end up riding in a cart, and he broke his vow on that. He ended up riding in the back of somebody's cart, but
Okay, how far was he whenever he started driving on the car?
he'd been a long way, and it was rainy or something. I think there were circumstances, but but we're gonna say that you're like me and you don't want to sleep on the ground by the side of the road. What's another option? Okay, monastery. Why a monastery? Because they're hospitable. Hospitality is a Christian virtue, right? Can anybody tell me? I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. Ideas are occurring to me. Why is it a Christian virtue to entertain strangers? Why does the Bible say that it is good to entertain strangers, Hans?
That they might want to know more about Christ.
This is true. This is very true. But I'm thinking of a particular passage. It says, if you entertain strangers, some people have entertained strangers that weren't just normal strangers, like Abraham. I think it's the book of Hebrews says that some people have entertained angels unaware, which is cool. So monasteries usually had a room for people passing by. They had guest rooms. Any other options? An inn. There were hotels. Now, it might not be very clean. The food may be so-so, and you don't have choices of food. You know, this is stew we made today. Do you want some? That's the deal. But here's the thing about the inns. This is true up until just maybe 150 years ago. You sleep in a bed with other people. People you don't know necessarily. You just find out, okay, this guy is sharing your room. Like we can fit 2 in this bed, we can fit 3 in this bed. Okay. So in the book Moby Dick, I knew that would get you. I knew. It gets me too, Jaden. Like, no, I'm not sharing no.
You don't even know the person.
And it was a thing. So in the book Moby Dick that only took place about 150 years ago, there's a famous scene where the main character has to share a room, and he shares it with this native guy named Queequeg from New Zealand or something, and he's all painted and tattooed, and he doesn't really speak English, and he's very scary, and he thinks the guy's going to kill him in the night. That's how he spends his first night in the inn. Turns out Queequeg is quite nice, but he didn't know that the first night. Yeah, Oren.
So it turns out the other guy in the bed has cold, and now I have a fever, and now everybody else in the bed has a fever.
Well, I feel like that might be the least of your problems, honestly. If I can get away with only a cold, I feel like it was a win. Yeah, Owen. You know what I did? I'll come and get yours. That's okay. Hey guys, I need you to stop talking to each other. Stay with me, okay? Because you know what? What happens when you talk to each other is you slowly get louder and louder. Then I get louder and louder, and then by the time the high schoolers come in, my throat is worn out. So have mercy on me, and also on the people around you that want to listen. So by the side of the road, monasteries, inns. I found one more. Dorothy Mills mentioned one more place you might be able to stay. You just wrote a paper about them. Somebody's castle. Castles often had guest rooms and guest areas. I don't know if you can just knock on the door of a strange castle and say, will you let me spend the night here? Or if you have connections. They did sometimes. Often they were showing up because they had an errand there. But yeah, in Sir Gawain, the story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, he just showed up at that castle when he's looking for the Green Chapel. Hey guys, we're talking again. I think the next thing is I'm going to start moving people around, and I really don't want to. I don't want it to be that way. So police yourself, all right? So I don't have to police you. Okay, now, I told you that people often didn't go very far from their homes. Now I'm going to tell you something opposite. Quite a few people decided to take the risks, all the risks, sleeping, I don't know, in a bed with strangers or on the ground, and muddy roads and robbers and tolls. They decided they wanted to take a trip for a particular reason. This is the next question I asked you. What is a pilgrimage? I'm going to let Jaden have it.
Okay, so what I thought it was basically a road trip, or it was a heart-searching road trip.
A heart-searching road trip.
Yeah.
I like that. Does this road trip have a particular destination? What do you want to add to that, Nathan?
Jerusalem.
What? Jerusalem? Is that the only place we might go on a pilgrimage?
No, they're also like, I don't know, some other places.
And Caleb, what do all these places have in common that we're going to?
They're all holy.
They're all holy. They all have religious significance. Does that make sense?
All
Now,
ruins.
so Jerusalem, what is its religious significance? This is a very easy question. What happened in Jerusalem?
A bunch of things.
Well, what in particular do you think people went to commemorate? Jesus, the death and resurrection of Jesus. People would go to Bethlehem. You know, if you go all the way to Jerusalem, you might as well take a pit stop at Bethlehem because there was a cathedral of monastery cathedral at in Spain for St. James of Compostela, and people would often go there. You know, if I live in England, I brought my map. I finally brought my map. Sure, Zach. I always want it, but I wish I had a place to put it up. So hold up a little bit. So if I live in England, here's Jerusalem. This is a long trip. I'm probably going to want to go by sea. I'll probably go across France by land, get a boat, and sail to Jerusalem because overland it's very dangerous, very long. Well, hire a boat. Yeah, I would pay. There were people who passenger boats. Do you know what I mean? They would do it for pay. But if I live in England, it's much easier to go to Spain. It's going to be cheaper, less dangerous, and I don't have to be gone from my home as long. But so often people were going to St. James of Compostela. People went to Jerusalem, but you can put this down. There was in England, so conveniently, a destination for pilgrimage. And it was Canterbury, the cathedral at Canterbury. Now, we talked about this. I'll be so happy if somebody remembers, but I don't expect you to remember. Something happened at Canterbury. Somebody died. Yes, the martyr guy, Thomas Becket. Do you remember we talked about the fact that Henry II wanted Thomas to be the archbishop because he thought Thomas was his best bud, you know, and Thomas will do anything I say. And then he didn't. And the king got so angry. He was in France with 4 of his knights, and he said, "Who will rid me of this troublesome priest?" And the knights thought, "Oh yeah, we will." They took him very seriously, and they went and just stabbed him to death right in the church in front of the altar. Well, instantly people saw him as a martyr because he stood up for the church's rights, you know, against the king. And people started traveling to Canterbury to visit the tomb of Thomas Becket. Which brings me to the book that you are going to start over Thanksgiving. Every year, people would get together and they would go on trips to Canterbury. Did I tell you the story? I think I did. How I went to Canterbury and so many pilgrims had been there that the stones were worn away. Should I tell you? I think I told you that. Because for 800 years of people visiting, people would get together. Now, from what we've already talked about, if I'm going on a trip like that, why would I like to travel in a group instead of by myself? What do you think, Nathan? Robbers. It's much safer. Get a group together. Don't travel by yourself. Around the year 1400-ish, there was a man in England named Geoffrey Chaucer. And he worked for the government, but he's also a writer. He'd written a lot of stories and poetry and stuff. And he got an idea. I'm going to write a book about pilgrims going to Canterbury. And he called it the Canterbury Tales. And you are not reading the actual Canterbury Tales. We're reading a retelling of many of the tales. It's called the Chaucer Storybook. And for the next time we meet, I would like you to read chapters 1 through 6. Chapters 1 through 6 of the Chaucer Storybook. It's sort of Renaissance-ish time, but it doesn't really have to do with that. Chaucer's idea was that he would just have a reason to tell a bunch of cool stories, you know, sort of like the Arabian Nights is just a reason to tell cool stories. You know, the whole story about how she's telling stories every night to the Sultan. It's just a reason to tell cool stories. This is a reason to tell cool stories, but it's a group of pilgrims on their way to Canterbury. And they're traveling together for safety. And in the first chapter, I will just kind of tell you an outline of it. The guy who hosts the inn, the guy who owns the inn where they're all meeting, says, "You guys are a fun group. You guys are fun. I'm going to go with you. I'm going to go with you to Canterbury. And here's the deal. I think we'll play a game because, you know, it gets boring. Road trips can be boring if you don't have anything to do." He said, "We're going to make everybody tell 2 stories on the way there and 2 stories on the way back. And we're going to have a vote who told the best story. And whoever wins, when we get back to the inn, everybody else has to pay for their dinner and their night, and they get to sit in the place of honor." So everybody says, okay. So they pick straws to see who goes first. And then they go around, and the people traveling tell stories. I would like you to read the first few stories of the Canterbury Tales. But it talks about people going on a pilgrimage. I have a question for you. We don't really, can I assume that nobody here has ever traveled somewhere because it's religiously significant? Like, maybe you have. Jaden, have you been somewhere that, like, you went there only because it's religious? And where did you go? Well, yes. That's not a pilgrimage. I should say, that's true. Okay, I asked for that. However, usually it's farther away and it's very specific. I've never gone somewhere simply because something religious happened there. But let me ask you this. Have you ever gone to a place? Nathan, sit up. Have you ever gone to a place just because of what happened there? Have you gone to a place because of its history? Where did you go, Owen? Okay. So the only reason to go there is because the battle was there, right? If there hadn't been a battle there, it'd just be like a field. But now it's special because something happened there. Can anybody else think of somewhere? Where did you go, Asher? And if it hadn't been his home, would it have been special? I mean, it might have been cool, but it wouldn't have been special. Oren, where did you go? Oh. And could you go in? Was it still safe to go in? Very cool. Very cool. Detours?
You're going somewhere.
Sure. If you go out of your way to see it. I was thinking more that's the whole point of trip, but did you detour somewhere? Okay, Springfield. Sure. Nathan's been waiting. What do you got, Nathan?
Me and my Boy Scout group actually camped out at the arsenal. And we went to a couple museums and we saw a couple of tanks.
Well, you know, that might not be quite the same, although it is interesting, because something special didn't happen there, if you know what I mean. Well, things did happen on Arsenal Island, but, well, that's true. Okay, maybe that was not fair to Island. Okay, I'm going to do Micah next. Lincoln's house, only because Lincoln was there. All right, we're going to finish up these 4 guys, and then I'm going to move on. Jaden, where'd you go?
Camp.
And what happened at this camp?
We invited kids to come.
Okay, but did something happen in that place historically? Like long ago, did something?
That my mom was there.
Well,
I mean, that's kind of.
all right. Yeah, Bentley. So where did you go?
South Carolina.
And what was there? Oh, okay. Oh, all right. I'm going to give Jaden another shot.
Niagara Falls.
But what happened there?
So basically, I guess
You went to Niagara Falls to see it,
I-
not because a guy went down the falls in a barrel.
But okay, so did you go there specifically to commemorate the person who went over in a barrel? No, I know. I felt like that was the answer. It is cool though. All right, I'm doing Ori and Jonathan, and then we're going to move on. Ori, where'd you go? And what happened there? A lot of things happened there. Okay, Jonathan, lay it on us. You're the last one. Philadelphia, tons of things happened in Philadelphia, right? The Liberty, the Constitution. our family went on a pilgrimage of sorts to Boston, I guess, when my kids were little, and we went to Plymouth Plantation, but mostly Boston because we went to Paul Revere's house and the cemeteries. You know, William Bradford is buried there. Yeah, Boston Harbor. See, that is significant. So that's the sort of thing we're talking about. I go to this place because it has religious significance. There's something there, just like we go to some place for historical significance. So I suppose in a way we go on pilgrimages, but I've been on historical pilgrimages, but not religious ones. All right, so most people stayed home. A lot of people went on pilgrimage. A couple of people traveled a long way. Tell me who Marco Polo is, not the name you shout in the pool. Yes, Nathan.
He was the guy.
And what did he do?
He documented his adventure from Italy all the way to China on foot and everywhere around the world.
He went to China. It doesn't do me any good to get my map because China is off this map. Thousands of miles. Here's the story. Marco had, excuse me, Marco had a dad. Marco had a dad and an uncle who went to China. And what do they have in China? Why go to China, by the way? I mean, it's cool, but there's
Silk, jewels,
spices, silks, and jewels, wealth, and also, lest we forget, just because you're curious. Why do you go places sometimes? Why did Jaden's family probably go to Niagara Falls? Because they were curious about what it looked like. Yeah, Oren. Okay, that is a reason when you're a kid, and I have those places too in my past. So Marco's dad and uncle came back after having met the great Khan. That's what they called the king, the emperor, the leader of China. This guy's name was Kublai Khan. And he let them go home and he asked them to come back. Actually, what he asked for were missionaries. The Polos told the Khan about Jesus. And he said, I would really like you to send some people here that would instruct my people about this religion. And so they traveled home and they went to the Pope to get missionaries, but the Pope had died and they were waiting for a new Pope. So they couldn't really get the mission going. Yeah, Owen, what do you want to say? I don't know. Do you know? I don't know why people say that. It's fun to say.
Across the pool is China.
Okay, this can be your Thanksgiving homework. Somebody find out why Marco Polo got turned into a pool game. Okay, back to the real thing though. They went back, but they decided to take young Marco with them. He was 17. And he spent 20 years in China. He learned the language. He was really good at what he did. And the Khan apparently entrusted him with all sorts of embassies on his behalf. Finally, they kind of wanted to go home, because it's a long time to be away from home. He didn't really want him to go. But finally, he said, okay, I understand. You're homesick. You would like to go home. He loaded them down with jewels and treasure, and they traveled home. They'd been gone for so long. They showed up at home back in Italy, kind of ragged. All right. And beards and long hair and in sort of oriental looking clothing. And everybody wasn't sure who they were. It's like, no, we're the Polos. We're the Polos. No, are you the Polos? Yeah, I promise. We're the Polos. And we've been to China. We've been to China for 20 years. Like, no, you haven't. Yeah, we have tons of jewels and stuff from the Khan. No, you don't. And then they opened up their pockets and they just start putting the jewels out. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. And I don't know what to do about that. Yeah, Zach.
I heard that in his book he wrote about a giant with one big foot in the sea or something.
Yeah, there's a lot of weirdnesses. I don't know if that's one of the ones I marked. Okay, here we go. All right. This is a little long, but it reminds me of the Arabian Nights. Okay. He's talking about a great desert. This desert is reported to be so long that it would take a year to go from end to end. And at the narrowest point, it takes a month to cross it. It consists entirely of mountains and sand and valleys. There's nothing at all to eat. But I can tell you that after traveling a day and a night, you find drinking water. Not enough water to supply a large company, but enough for 50 or 100 men with their beasts, like an oasis. And all the way through the desert, you must go for a day and a night before you find water. And I can tell you that in 3 or 4 places, you find the water bitter and brackish. But at all the other watering places, that is 28 in all, the water's good. Beasts and birds there are none, because there is nothing to eat. But I assure you that one thing is found here, and that a very strange one, which I will now relate to you. The truth is this: when a man is riding by night through the desert, and something happens to make him loiter and lose touch with his companions by dropping asleep or for some other reason, and afterwards he wants to rejoin them, then he hears spirits talking in such a way that they seem to be his companions. Sometimes, indeed, they even hail him by name. Often these voices make him stray from the path so that he never finds it again. And in this way, many travelers have been lost and have perished. And sometimes in the night, they are conscious of a noise like the clatter of a great cavalcade of riders away from the road. And believing that these are some of their own company, they go where they hear the noise. And when day breaks, find they are victims of an illusion and in an awkward plight. And there are some who, in crossing this desert, have seen a host of men coming towards them, and suspecting they were robbers, have taken flight. So, having left the track and not knowing how to return to it, they have gone hopelessly astray. And even by daylight, men hear these spirit voices. And often you fancy you are listening to the strains of many instruments, especially drums, and the clash of arms. For this reason, bands of travelers make a point of keeping very close together.
It sounds like the mix between a friendly travel guide and an old creepy guy from a castle.
Yes, yes. Owen, what's your
That's what they might be talking about as like the Gobi Desert.
maybe? Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I'm going to save that one for last because it's the one that everybody loves the most. Okay, here's another story he tells. Doo-doo-doo. Okay. The more southerly islands, which men do not willingly visit because of this southward drift, are very numerous, and it is said that they are inhabited by griffin birds, who make their appearance here at certain seasons of the year. But you must know they are by no means such as men in our country suppose, or as we portray them, half bird and half lion. You know, that's a griffin is half bird and half lion. He says they're not like that. According to the report of those who have seen them, it is true, that they are a blend of bird and lion. But I assure you that these men, actual eyewitnesses, report that in these eyewitnesses report, they report that they are so huge and bulky that one of them can pounce on an elephant and carry it up to a great height in the air. That is really concerning. Then it lets it go so that the elephant drops to earth and is smashed to pulp, whereupon the griffin bird perches on the carcass and feeds at its ease. They have a wingspan of 30 paces, and their wing feathers are 12 paces long and a thickness proportionate to their length. Some where's my pen? Some people call this a rock. I think that Arabian Nights. Do you remember the Sinbad was down in the valley where the diamonds were and the big rock? Yeah, the rock's egg. Okay, this is the one everybody loves, though. This is the last one I will read. My son, I have a son that particularly loves this for whatever reason. Andaman is a very big island. The people have no king. They are idolaters and live like wild beasts. Now, let me tell you of a race of men well worth describing in our book. You may take it for a fact that all the men of this island have heads like dogs and teeth and eyes like dogs. For I assure you that the whole aspect of their faces is that of big mastiffs. They are a very cruel race. Whenever they get hold of a man who is not one of their kind, they devour him. They have abundance of spices of every kind. Their food is rice and milk and every sort of flesh. They have coconuts, apples of paradise, and many other fruit different from ours. Dog-headed men. So I have a son that's into this. Apparently, there are all over the world reports of dog-headed men. So much so that it has a name. This is good. Use this 3 times in a sentence when this would ever come up in a conversation. Cynocephaly. All right, cynocephaly. It's Greek. Kephale means head, and kuno means dog-headed. Cynocephalous men. So just add that to your repertoire of cool words that you can just know forever. Cynocephaly. What?
Like dog-headed men will see you.
I
Take a knife and like, or take your heart out.
that's very descriptive and explicit, Jaden. Thank you for that. So I'm going to do something else to you because I can, and because it's just so cool. So the story of Marco Polo. Oh, first I'll mention the actual historical thing. Well, they're both historical. There was an explorer, a traveler, who is noted, and it so happens this was his favorite book, and he carried around and read it a lot. It was Christopher Columbus. This was Columbus's favorite book. He did not find any dog-headed men, as far as I know, anywhere he traveled in the New World. But pretty sure he didn't die I was going to say at the hands of dog-headed men. That seems like a wrong metaphor. At the paws of dog-headed men. So, okay, much later than this, in the 1800s, late 1700s, there was a poet in England, renowned poet named Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And I got to tell you his story. It's related to Kublai Khan, and because it's just so fun. So, Mr. Coleridge, I must tell you, had a habit of taking drugs. Sorry to report this. A drug, opium. Some of you are familiar with poppies and okay. Opium used to be kind of a thing. And he is that and in his sleep he dreamed a poem. He dreamed an entire poem in his sleep. And he woke up. He tells the story himself. He woke up and he grabbed paper and he started furiously writing the poem. And he's working on it. And then someone knocks at his door. And he tries to ignore it. The guy's not going away. The guy's not going away. So he puts down his pen and he goes and he answers the door. It's nothing. It's just some minor business. It's nothing that couldn't wait. But you probably see this coming. When he said goodbye to the guy and closed the door and went back to his desk, the poem was gone. Do you know how dreams fade? You know how if you tell someone right as soon as you wake up, I dreamed this, then you remember it. But if you wait an hour or two, it's like, I don't know, it had something. I think there was a bus involved, and you lose the plot. So we have this poem, Kublai Khan. It was about Kublai Khan's palace. It's kind of long. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but the beginning and the ending are really famous. So I'm going to give you a little peek into, I guess, what an opium-induced dream can do for you. Yeah, the part where he stopped. It starts like this, and you might have heard this beginning. It's very famous. You probably will, if you haven't already. In Xanadu did Kublai Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alf the sacred river ran, through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. So twice 5 miles of fertile ground, with tall walls and towers were girdled round. And there were gardens bright with sinuous rills, where blossomed many an incense-bearing tree. And here were forests ancient as the hills, enfolding sunny spots of greenery. Then it goes on longer. Have you heard that? In Xanadu did Kublai Khan a stately pleasure dome decree? Yes, very famous beginning. So here's where he ended. A damsel with a dulcimer in a vision once I saw. It was an Abyssinian maid, and on her dulcimer she played, singing of Mount Abora. Could I revive within me her symphony and song? To such a deep delight 'twould win me, that with music loud and long, I would build that dome in air, that sunny dome, those caves of ice. All who heard should see them there, and all should cry, beware, beware, his flashing eyes, his floating hair. Weave a circle round him thrice, and close your eyes with holy dread. For he on honeydew hath fed, and drunk the milk of paradise. And then he gets up to answer the door, and the end. I'm so sorry for Mr. Coleridge and for all of us. 'Cause it could have been really awesome. Yeah, so this guy is notorious. How would you like to go down in history as the man who interrupted one of the great poems? You were the guy knocking on the door. You ruined the poem. And you have to live with that. I don't want to be that person. It's just getting to the good part. All right, so this is the story of Marco Polo, influenced Columbus, and honestly, there started to be more and more back and forth travel into the Far East. By the 1500s, there were Jesuit priests traveling to China, setting up churches, and they were evangelizing the Chinese. Okay, so that was our look at travel. The second chapter I had you read was about friars. Friars are different than monks in this way. Where do monks live? In a monastery. They stay put, they stay in one place, generally. Friars roam around. They don't really have, well, when they started out, they weren't meant to have a home base. They traveled around and basically asked people for food and money that to live. Like they just, but you see a friar in your town and you just give him food, or you invite him into dinner or something like that. But the two most famous orders of friars were really, really different from each other. Our first major player is Saint Francis. Yes, indeed. He was from the town of Assisi. It doesn't have, I don't know if it, I've put too many, I feel like that's way too many S's. I think I don't know how many S's it has. Forgive me, I don't know. Oh, it's right there in my book. Oh yeah, that's right. Two and then one. What did this is the next question I asked you. What did St. Francis love? What did he seem to value more than anything else? Poverty. He called her Lady Poverty. I'm marrying Lady Poverty. Why? That's the big question. What's so great about being poor? Do you want to be poor? Okay, I don't want to be poor either. But yet we say, blessed are the poor in spirit, but nobody wants to be poor in body. What happens to us when we get lots of stuff? Do you ever have that feeling, okay, because Christmas is coming, can we just be completely honest? You get a bunch of stuff for Christmas, but then like by January 1st, you're thinking of something else you'd like to buy? Okay, can we just be honest? Yes. Mm. I often get something new and it doesn't stay exciting very long. And I want something else. I want something else. And you know why? It's because stuff won't ever satisfy me because I want something more than stuff, I'm made for something more than stuff. But so when we have a lot of stuff, we tend to want more. Is there anything else a problem with having stuff? What does stuff need? Yeah, Jonathan. Needs space. All right, I get stuff and now I have to buy a bigger house to hold my stuff, or I have to rent a storage facility, or I have to build a new shed to store my stuff. That's a pain. Yeah, Asher. Maintenance. I got to take care of it. Did he steal yours? Or I have to take care of it. Things break, right? Sometimes, now we have some pretty expensive things like cars. They cost a lot when they break. That's another thing. If you have stuff, what could happen while you're gone to your stuff? Somebody could steal it. So now I have to buy locks and I have to get a security system. It's just a pain. But we don't want to give up our stuff. We put up with the pain. St. Francis said, stuff is a pain and it separates me from God. I'm just going to have no stuff. Yeah, Jonathan.
I got a cat for Christmas and I did not get bored of it.
Oh, okay. You know what? Living creatures, hopefully,
Because they
are
get
not.
they-
Yes.
I mean, I'm guinea pig.
You know,
Guinea pigs are
some people, some people do get, I'm glad to hear Jonathan did not get bored of it. Sometimes people, especially little kids, littler than you, sometimes they get animals, get living creatures for a present, and then they love them, for a few weeks because they're exciting, and then they squeeze them to death. Yes. Hopefully, you don't give to a child too young to understand how to take care of the living creature, but
I was 7.
okay, well, that's plenty old enough to take care of a cat. St. Francis decided, by the way, St. Francis's dad was wealthy. St. Francis grew up with stuff. But he felt God calling him. He went to a chapel nearby and it was kind of run down. Are we with me? And it was kind of run down. And he heard a voice saying, "Build up my church, Francis." And he thought God meant that church. So he just went out there and he started hauling rocks by himself to build up the church. And it turns out later he decided that it meant the church, not this particular chapel that he was supposed to build up. But word got around that he was out traveling around just telling people God loves you. And you know what? This is the other thing he was known for loving. He not only told this to the people, he told it to the animals. Sometimes I think it's a little weird, and then sometimes I think it's so charming. He would travel around. I brought a painting in by this author, this artist Giotto, an early Renaissance artist. This is his St. Francis and the Birds. I'm just going to talk while I walk. St. Francis famously, hey, Jaden, give me a turn. St. Francis was preaching a sermon, and the birds were in the tree. You know how sometimes the birds can be very loud? Have you been? The big flocks of birds, the starlings particularly. Oh my goodness. And so they were drowning out St. Francis. And they say, St. Francis, he said, "Brother birds, you've had all day to talk. Please be silent for a while so I can have a turn." And they did. This at all. I don't know why. Imagine the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve are with these animals. First of all, I assume none of them would have been scared ever because there was nothing to be scared of. And I also find it quite interesting that a serpent talks to her and she doesn't think this is odd. Maybe it's because it's new and she doesn't know how the animal world works. But I'm curious. C.S. Lewis was also curious about this. What changed in our relationship with the animals when we sinned? What changed in our dominion? Maybe St. Francis was given back something that we all would have had if there'd been no sin. That animals like Jonathan's cat or our dogs, that they can absolutely be your friend on a different level than they are. I'm not saying they'd ever be rational, that made in the image of God and they're not. But we might have a relationship with them. Certainly they wouldn't have run away from us or flown away from us in fear because they wouldn't have had anything to be afraid of. So maybe St. Francis had that. Yeah, Warren. They do. It could have been coincidental.
can run away.
St. Francis is known for, his relationship with animals. And hold on, I'm looking. I thought that Dorothy Mills put in here part of his Canticle of the Sun. Do you guys remember reading that at all? Like a long prayer? Oh, here it is. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's in your book. I'll just read part of it. O Most High, Almighty, good Lord God, to thee belong praise, glory, honor, and all blessing. Praised be my Lord God with all his creatures, and especially our brother the sun. I'm sorry, guys. Who brings us the day and who brings us the light. Fair is he and shining with a very great splendor. O Lord, he signifies to us thee. Praise be, my Lord, for our sister the moon, and for the stars which he has set clear and lovely in heaven. Praise be to my Lord for our sister water, who is very serviceable unto us, and humble and precious and clean. Praise be to my Lord for our brother fire, through whom thou givest us light in the darkness. He is bright and pleasant and very mighty and strong. And then this is interesting. Praised be my Lord for our sister, the death of the body, from which no man escapeth. Woe to him who dieth in mortal sin. Blessed are they who are found walking by thy most holy will, for the second death shall have no power to do them harm. Praise ye and bless ye the Lord, and give thanks unto him, and serve him with great humility. He started out with just a few guys who wanted to just serve the poor and preach love and peace. But people noticed. And finally, they went to the Pope and they said, can we be our own order? Can we be recognized as the order of St. Francis? And he said, I like what you're doing. Keep up the good work. And so this was the start of the Franciscan order, named after St. Francis. He was concerned with love, nature, running away from the lure of material possessions that can grab hold of us. Now, he lived roughly the same time as another man named Dominic. It's happening again. There it is. Oh, actual illustration picture? Or just story?
Dominic trying books.
Oh, yes, St. Dominic burning books. We don't love that, do we?
Or like, especially the fact that he never tried the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah, they were. And you know what? I'm going to just be crazy and step out on a limb and offend you guys. There are probably some books in existence that deserve to be burned. They're just wicked. The problem is who gets to make that decision. I think that's what we're uncomfortable with. But let's just face it. Some things should be wiped off the face of the earth. They just should. It's not a popular position today, but it's my position. St. Dominic was concerned about something completely different than Francis. Francis cared about the caring for people, caring for nature. Dominic cared about what you think. He cared about your intellect. He cared about your knowledge, and particularly about heresies that were springing up. There were small Christian groups springing up that were believing strange things, not orthodox. He thought the best way to combat this was really to teach the truth, to hold the light of truth up. And so he devoted his life, and he was a brilliant man. Although, and this, if there are any of you, me included, that sometimes feel like we're not as smart as we wish we were. We have studying is harder. Anyway, when St. Dominic was a boy, he had a nickname. They called him the dumb ox. That's not a compliment in any now or then. Nobody, dumb ox, because he was really slow to speak. You know, if you asked him a question, he just sort of sat there for a while because he's mulling it over. And he just didn't seem very engaged in his studies. And if I got him confused with Thomas Aquinas, I think it was Dominic. Anyway, we'll just go with that. Dominic, I think Dominic was, I'm looking for help. Okay. All right. I'll correct myself in the future if I find out that I've blown that. He went on to be one of the great teachers of the church. And he also started an order. And his name got turned into this fun pun, I guess, game. Dominic, his followers became known as the Dominicanes. Do you see Dominic there? It means the dogs of the Lord, like the watchdogs, you know, like they're going after the heretics. They're going after anybody who's attacking the church, the Dominicanes. Yeah, go ahead.
Does St. Dominic have anything to do with the Dominican Republic or not?
I have no idea.
Is that-
I just feel like no, but I can't tell you. I can't even remember which one was the dumb ox suddenly. Now I'm second guessing myself. So yes.
Just in talking about St. Francis of Assisi and how loving he's described as, it's kind of interesting to think about St. Dominic was loving in a different way. Because, you know, we can go, well, he was bludgeoning people with the truth, but truly he cared enough to say, no, this is what's true
Yes.
and this is what's right. And he was willing to sacrifice for it. So, I mean, ultimately, he was loving too.
Yes.
You know, I think sometimes in our culture we go, you're not loving if you're speaking the truth, you know? So, I don't know, I really resonate with him.
Yeah. Thank you. It's important. You know, so here's an example. So there's different ways to love somebody, right? I'm loving when the reading at my church this week was the Good Samaritan. And so, that's still ringing with me. It's like that kindness and that loving. But here's another love. Say you have a friend who's getting ready to travel to Illinois across the bridge, and you happen to know that the I-74 bridge is out. Do you just say, well, okay, love ya, have a good trip, we're gonna fall in the river, but have a good trip? No, you would take away their keys. If they were convinced, no, I'm driving across the bridge, and you thought the bridge was out, you would do everything in your power to make sure they didn't go. That would be loving, right? It would be terrible to just let them go plummet to their deaths, I don't know, in the Mississippi River. So when we speak the truth and we're rescuing people from the hazards of lies and falsehood, this is also love. Thank you. That was really well said. There's a great poem called The Divine Comedy. It's probably possibly the greatest piece of literature ever written in the history of the world. Certainly the highlight of the Middle Ages. And there's a moment where the author, Dante, he's traveling through kind of the levels of heaven, all right, the spheres of heaven. And he meets Dominic and Francis. And he also meets a follower of Francis and a follower of Dominic. The follower of Dominic gives a speech, and he praises the followers of Francis, and then talks about how the followers of Dominic have grown lax and cold over the years. Then he meets a follower of St. Francis. The follower of St. Francis praises St. Dominic and then complains about his own order. This mutual admiration and love for two men with really different callings. So I guess maybe also the lesson is not everybody is called to do the same thing. And maybe we're not very good judges of whether or not somebody is doing what they're supposed to be doing. We know that sin, I'm not talking about sin, but I'm just saying like a life's calling. I don't know what someone else's life's calling is. St. Francis thought learning was a big fat waste of time. He discouraged books. He flat out discouraged book learning. He's very, we'd say, experiential, I guess. He wants to go out and smell the flowers and hear the birds and pet the animals and be in nature. And he thought that was the best book. Dominic was just a bookworm. He was very studious, but they had different gifts and they used them in a different way. So I think this is why they're in this chapter together for us, because they both loved God. This is what they have in common, but they served him in really, really different ways. And we all are going to serve him in different ways too. And so I guess the lesson is don't judge how someone else is serving him. If they're not actively sinning, that we can judge. But otherwise, I don't know what someone else's calling is. If that makes sense. All right. Thank you. I am going to ask you guys to read. What are we reading? Chapter 18. I'll write this on. And all of chapter 19. It's only a tiny section in chapter 1. Or chapter 18. It's about education. And then chapter 19 is all about learning. Oh, here's Thomas Aquinas. I'm going to. No. All right, it's gonna haunt me now. I can't remember if I've told a story about the wrong person. So that's all I want you to do. I want you to read the Dorothy Mills reading. I want you to start the Chaucer storybook. And for the rest of our time, let's talk about King Arthur. We finished these kind of crazy stories, a little bit crazy about King Arthur, who turns out, we talked about this last week, who is the
Galahad.
Galahad turns out to be the purest, best knight. Who are his parents?
Elaine and
Elaine and Lancelot, when they decided to sort of get married, when she was disguised as Guinevere, uh, ended up having a child. And even though they did something that was wrong, their child is the greatest knight of all. But I'm glad you mentioned Gawain, because I found something very interesting. So, they're all following the Holy Grail. And it's told them many, many times that you can only be the purest, most holy knight to come into the presence of the Holy Grail. And it ends up being Galahad. But, okay. Listen to what happened with Gawain, though. Gawain was on his way looking for the Grail, and they finally found that creepy castle of Carbonek, right? That disappears on you. You go and then you leave and you can't find it again. It just disappears. Gawain was on his way, and he met someone who said, "Noble Gawain, you may free this land from the evil that is upon it if you be found worthy. Go now to Carbonek, and when all is accomplished, return swiftly to Camelot, for you still have duties to perform. But I charge you to be moderate in all things, to speak only in due season. More I am not permitted to reveal. Be moderate. Don't eat too much. Don't talk too much. Watch it." He shows up at Carbonek and they're having a party. I don't know. Like, "Oh, Gawain, have some more to eat. Oh, Gawain, don't you want to tell some stories and jokes?" No, he doesn't. But he ends up taking the Grail as the Grail passes through. And it says, "Then a mighty shout of joy rose from those in the hall until the very roof shook with the noise. For Gawain had resisted the temptations of the hall and had asked the question which would loosen the curse." Gawain gets to be the one who lifts the curse from Carbonek. He's not the greatest knight in the world, but he's pretty doggone good. I can see why Zach said, well, maybe you meant to say Galahad, but Gawain is up there, isn't he?
Oh yeah.
Gawain has proven himself. and they ride away from Carbonek, and listen to the setting. Lancelot and Gawain bade farewell to King Pelles and rode away towards Camelot. And as they passed through the wastelands, they saw the first green buds on the forest trees and the first blades of grass showing beneath the barren earth. The land is coming back to life. And all the people blessed Sir Gawain and sped him on. Gawain gets to have a part, even though he's not the best. Sometimes we're not the best, but it doesn't mean we don't have a part to play. Gawain had a huge part to play. However, well, actually, let's talk about Percival. Do you remember Percival? Percival's the guy who grew up in the forest, and he didn't really know what knights were. He didn't understand how to get a piece of armor off people. Remember, he was going to burn the guy out of the armor until an old guy said, "Dude, it comes off in pieces. You don't have to burn bodies out." Percival had an episode where he had more than one episode. Do you remember this? A beautiful lady comes and she pitches this silk pavilion and she's feeding him with all sorts of food and, tempting him with her love. And finally, he gets to the point where he says, no, I'm not sinning with you. I'm not doing that. And then everything just blows away and disappears. It's all a dream. It's all a fantasy. It's all a temptation, a mirage. See how these knights get tempted over and over because they're told this. The hermit, the old hermit that keeps popping up, "There are few of you that will come to the Grail. And you, Sir Bors, are one of them. Though you have done no great deeds, nor won undying fame in Logris. For in purity of life, and not in pride of deeds, dwells that which makes a man worthy to achieve this quest. This really makes me happy. Sir Bors, you've done no great deeds, but you get to be there when the whole Grail thing goes down, when Galahad's heart. Awesome. The Grail quest is finished, right? Galahad, turns out, did you catch who Elaine and her dad, Pelles, who are they descended from? Joseph of Arimathea, who founded the castle of Carbonek. Or so the story runs. Galahad is a descendant of Joseph of Arimathea through Elaine. And he becomes the last Grail priest, whatever, and then vaporizes, disappears, dies. Great. The end. Except it wasn't the end. The evil temptations that come at all these people, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, the Lady Ragnall, all of these things, they conquer them. But what happens when the evil is inside? You know, there's two ways to bring down, I don't know, a kingdom, right? You can attack it from outside. You can rot from the inside. And things are rotten in Camelot. What's the big problem? Remind me. Lancelot and Guinevere love each other. And this is just not good. This is not good. And they know it. Until one night, after Lancelot has ridden out and rescued Guinevere because she's been kidnapped, she says, Lancelot, I would like to thank you personally and in private. Would you like to visit me? And he says, you bet. It chanced that Agravain, Sir Gawain's brother, heard her words. He was one of the wicked and disloyal knights who hated the queen and were jealous of Sir Lancelot's fame and renown. Agravain told Sir Mordred, his cousin, Queen Morgana Le Fay's son, enough said right there, right? Who was the evilest knight of all, hating all things good as his mother had done, and seeking ever to bring shame and ruin upon King Arthur. Mm-hmm. Close enough. I knew what you meant.
Didn't she turn good?
She did, weirdly, with no explanation whatsoever.
And she changed it back again.
Yeah. So we'll go back to that in a minute, Jaden. Sir Mordred is the evilest knight of all. Can you think of another story where a leader had an inner circle of trusted men, but one of them turned out to be rotten? Judas. Mordred is Judas.
What?
Right?
What? Real Judas.
No, not a real Judas. No, not literally. Jaden, be with it. Figuratively and metaphorically, not literally. He's acting like a Judas. He's the wickedness inside. So you guys read it. They nab Lancelot. He kills a bunch of people. He accidentally kills Gaheris and Gareth. Thank you. And Gawain's brothers. And then it goes on the run. Now Gawain hates Lancelot. Everything has fallen apart until they end up in the last battle. All right. At the very beginning of the book, if you guys remember this, you remember how Merlin used to just go talking and talking and talking and never shut up? Yeah. This was one of those. He says, year by year as he reigns, his kingdom shall grow. Not Britain, nor the islands of the seas, no, nor Armorica and Gaul, but Logris, the land of blessing, and God's kingdom upon earth. Face before the darkness falls again. And then Merlin also made this prediction. No man shall handle this sword now, save only Lancelot and Galahad his son, And that shall be when the knights of Logres seek for the Holy Grail. In the castle also you have a bed, but none shall lie in it without going mad, save Lancelot alone. But in the end, Lancelot shall use this sword, and the bravest knight of Logres, the man he best loves in the world, shall fall beneath it, and that shall be Gawain. But soon thereafter shall come the last battle on the plain of Camlan, and the darkness shall fall once more upon Logres. And it happens just as Merlin said. Lancelot wounds Gawain mortally. Gawain ends up dying of his wounds, all because of this sinful love and the rotter.
Everyone like Jerry King Arthur, didn't Merlin say something that
He did. He basically told him, you don't want to, you need to think twice before you do this, because this is planting a seed of evil. Apparently Merlin knows everything. And then but he does die. He goes in that cave and falls asleep. This is the weird thing.
It was so not climactic. It was just Merlin's gone now.
He was just gone. He was just gone, and Arthur's on his own.
Also, King Arthur's death wasn't super climactic.
No, it wasn't. He dies on the plane. Now, you got to understand. Remember I told you that King Arthur, the real King Arthur, whoever he was, probably lived around the year 400, 500, 550, somewhere in that, long before there were knights and armor and jousts and things like that. And what he was dealing with, and it says so in the book, the Saxons. Do you guys remember? We talked about that one week, that England had Britons, the Celts. They were living there and the Romans conquered them, but then the Romans went away. And there was a king named Vortigern. And he said, you know what, those Scottish, the Picts, they keep attacking. Hey, Saxons, would you like to come help us? Bad choice. They came and then they stayed and they took over. And King Arthur is the last, it's like I don't know, like the sun's going down and there's just a sudden flash of light right as the sun's on the horizon, and it lights things up really bright, and it just lasts for a moment and the sun goes down. That's King Arthur. He's that last flash of light, right, before the Saxons take over. Saxons aren't Christians. Saxons are heathens. England is being taken over by heathen people. And he's trying to hold out the glory of Christianity. Like Merlin said, you're the Christian kingdom. So yeah, so he dies. But does he die?
No.
See, he doesn't die. And this is, now Jaden, we're off to Morgana Le Fay. They load him on a ship, and the Lady Nimue, the Lady of the Lake, the Lady of the Isle of Avalon, and Queen Morgana Le Fay, Arthur's sister. They put him in the barge, and it says, the three ladies received him tenderly and laid him down with his head resting in the lap of the Lady of the Isle of Avalon. And Queen Morgana Le Fay wept softly. She's now suddenly good. He tells them, comfort yourself and do as best you may, for you remain to bear word of me to those who are yet alive. For I must go into the vale of Avalon, there to be healed of my grievous wound. But be you sure that I will come again when the land of Britain has need of me, and the realm of Logres shall rise once more out of the darkness. It is my understanding that the British people take this very seriously. I mean, as seriously as you take stories, and they still talk about, when Arthur comes back. When we need him, Arthur will come back. I feel like it would have been awesome when they were being bombed during World War II. I feel like Arthur, that would have been awesome if Arthur were coming back. Maybe there's a greater need someday. Probably it is just a story. But it's a lovely story, and it reminds me of something else. Arthur promised to come back again someday. Do we have a leader that has promised to come back again someday? I'm going away for a little while. A little while you will see me, and then you will not see me, he said. I'm going away for a little while, but I'll be back. I'll be back someday. And Arthur says the same thing. Why do people make up stories like that? Because that's what we want, right? We deeply want our great leader to come back again. And the wonderful thing is he will. Our great leader will. I'll be totally honest with you. I don't think Arthur's coming back. It would be nice. It'd be very cool. or Merlin. I don't think they're coming back. I know for a fact Jesus is coming back. I have no doubt about this whatsoever. That's what we really want, is our great leader to come back. Was there any episode in the story? I'd like to open it up if you guys want to talk about anything in particular, a story that struck you or that was interesting. One thing I'll mention, I don't remember if it was Jonathan or Oren. I feel like it was somebody on the side of the table. We were talking about when the Grail came around the round table and it passed Mordred and he cried. And now that we know the end, I said, wait till we see the end. Let me read that part again. On the Holy Grail entered into the hall covered in a cloth of white samite. Then on a sudden it departed from among them, and none might see where it went. But the sunbeam faded also, and they sat in silence, filled with a great peace. Only Sir Mordred hid his face in his hands, and the hot tears of shame trickled between his fingers. Why? Let's visit that again in the time we have. Why?
He's evil.
He's evil. Does he know he's evil?
Yes.
Apparently.
Apparently he knows he's near a holy thing that he's not worthy to be near. But here's the thing, does it stop him from doing evil things? No, it doesn't. He has warnings. His own conscience says, you shouldn't do this. You're not worthy. That's how Mordred reacts. He just goes ahead and does whatever he wants. Lancelot knows he's not worthy. How does Lancelot react to the Grail and the war and everything? How does Lancelot end up? Do you remember where he ends up and what he's doing for the rest of his life? Say it again. He goes into a monastery. He gets rid of his armor. I'm not a knight anymore. I'm going to do penance for the rest of my life for what I have caused. Guinevere does the same thing. It is. It is a little bit. It is a little bit. But is that better than Mordred's choice?
Yeah, it's still not diplomatic.
It was more for
He was supposed to come
Mordred
back to that
dies
battle, like, right?
after overturning the entire kingdom. Say it again, Zach.
Lancelot was supposed to come like all of a sudden right as Arthur's forces were losing and beat Mordred.
I know.
But then they ended on like a anticlimactic ending.
Did you guys get the impression? Because I do.
Wait,
Do you get the impression that this was all like this was God's will? This was the way it was going to be? Do you know what I mean? Do you think Lancelot could have turned the tide, or was this just going to happen? Because Merlin said, for the brief time, the glory of this kingdom before darkness falls again. It almost sounds a little fatalistic, like it's going to happen no matter what Lancelot does. There's one way this is going to go. Yeah, Jonathan.
sorry, I forgot what happened to Sir Kay.
I don't know if we ever hear about him specifically. They all end up dying one way or the other. You remember Arthur went to Gaul, to France, to chase down Lancelot, and some of them died there. Then the rest of them die in the Battle of Camlan. Yes.
Most of them died in the hospital.
Oh, that's true. We're not told of everybody's part in that, are we? Just a few key stories. But all of them were out looking for the Grail, and they all met adventures, and a lot of them didn't come back. Thank you, Micah. That's a good point. Yeah.
So in the back of my puffin classes, some things to think about. I've got some of them right. Do you think it mattered? No, it was that one. It was many of the events in this book are predicted long before they happen. Do the characters of King Arthur have any free will, or are they entirely prisoners of destiny?
And that's the question we're talking about, isn't it? Could Lancelot have made another decision, come back and save the day at the battle? Could Mordred have repented before he did it? These are deep questions about God knows all things, but yet we are free agents and we have free will. It's a hard combination of ideas. It's hard for grown-ups to wrestle with, honestly. Like if somebody foretells something, does that mean it's set in stone, as they say? It sounds a little bit like Merlin said, this is the way it's going to be. and Mordwell. Okay. Hopefully that has been an interesting adventure in the world of King Arthur. If you're into King Arthur, like seriously into King Arthur, there is a huge book. The standard medieval book is called Le Mort d'Arthur, but it's not in French. Okay, by Sir Thomas Mallory. It's really long, like 1,000 pages. It's really, really long. But it's all these stories and many, many more that were developed over centuries. So if you just think this is the coolest thing you ever read, there you go. You could just read and read and read. Yeah. Mm. And that's the problem with this. This is sort of the standard collection, but there are variants of all stories circling. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Or you can watch King Arthur, the quest for the Holy Grail. No, Monty Python, sorry.
Oh.
Oh yeah, Monty.
Okay. Hey, he said it, not me. So, although I alluded to it already once. Yes, not without parental permission, and I don't know. Yeah, everybody should see it eventually. Everybody should see it eventually. It's weirdly very much like the stories, honestly. All right, I will let you guys go. Have a lovely Thanksgiving. Just read for me, no writing, and I will see you in 2 weeks.
Salt.